First, we'll have a roll call. Bob Lux is not here. He comes from 160 as represented. Ron Wilson, that's me. I'm here. Kyle May here. Paul Martin here. Hartley present. Bill Gaynor
Here.
and Mike 36.
Here.
Ted Stanley here. David Smith
Here.
and Hugh Gladys represented.
Diane Lissa.
Okay, forum, we've got a meeting room, ready to go. Represent 160.
I am, basically not right.
Including me.
Just kidding, you a hard time. Let's have fun while we're here.
This may not be the day. Since we have a professional chaplain here, I'd like her to indicate.
And all Stephen. Heavenly Father, we come before you today as an assembled body. We humbly request that you bless this meeting, bless this community, bless our nation. Help us to work diligently and always for the common good and in the best interest of those that we have been elected to represent. Guide us to be insightful and prudent in our intentions, our visions, plans, deliberations, decisions, and their fulfillment. Work through us to provide a spirit of welcome to all in attendance, to engage in respectful and thoughtful dialogue and discussion with understanding, wisdom, and humility. Amen.
Amen.
If you wish, you might just take 60 seconds and just pray a prayer of your own. I would just, if you're looking for subject matter, there are those that are dealing with the flooding right now that happen north of us that have lost their houses and are really struggling to make it through. And so, Father God, we just ask that your gracious hand go upon those in our county that are trying to deal with loss tonight. We don't know how to fix their problems, but you are the great provider, and we know that you will, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Father, I ask, or rather now, I've asked you all to turn to the flag of the United States, and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now to the Texas flag.
On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to the Texas. One faith, under God, one indivisible.
Amen.
Next order of business will be comments from the floor. Several people signed up to speak. I'll take you in the order that they're signed up. John Taylor from 167.
Yes, good evening, trustees. I'm John Thaler, a resident.
I'm sorry, John. We have a 3-minute limit.
Yes, sir, I'm aware of that, but thank you. I'm still John Thaler.
I should have said it.
It's okay. I'm a resident of MUD 67 and also director-elect. After months of campaigning and talking directly with hundreds of residents and carefully reviewing the May 4th election results, it's clear to me, and I think it should be clear to you, that the Woodland residents are loudly voicing a no confidence or low confidence vote this board and their local MUDs. I ran with a group of 21 other like-minded and self-funded residents. We won 17 of 22 seats. That's over 75%. Next week, these 17 MUD directors will be installed. That's more than 1/3 of the current directors. We ran on 3 principles: further transparency, greater improved communications, and more judicious project vetting and financial oversight. On the transparency issue, next week, each of your 10 individual MUD will hold their monthly meeting. I strongly encourage each trustee to urge their MUD to install as soon as possible the newly elected directors. The voters have clearly spoken, results are overwhelming, and any lame duck session will be at odds with the clear will of the voters. Improved communications. Residents respect to learn of the 10-year plan to spend over $600 million that could possibly double their monthly bills. This lack of communication is solely the result of the board and local mud actions. I think this needs to be improved. Better project vetting and financial oversight. The AC pipeline debacle spoke volumes to the residents I spoke to. Possible approval of over $180 million to replace pipe without knowing its condition was considered irresponsible by many. Even worse, residents were furious to learn that some MUDs, I think 7 out of 10, approved spending $40 million to an unapproved $250+ million project. And that this vote came before the boards had received and thoroughly reviewed a $50,000 study that they had commissioned. In summary, given the overwhelming no confidence vote in this past election, and the fact that over 1/3 of current MUD directors will be replaced next week, I strongly urge this board to withhold approving any significant expenditures, including the $40 million toward the wastewater reclamation replacement plant, until the new directors are installed and included. There exists no emergency. The voters have clearly spoken. Are the directors listening? Thank you.
It's close. Mr. Mackey.
As you know, I am a past MUD director for 12 years in MUD 36, and I retired for a few years, and then I'm elected direct again. Elect, MUD director elect. And I want to second basically Mr. Thayer's comment that we were elected because of a lot of concerned citizens. And there are going to be a lot of new faces on this board and all of the MUDs. So, but I'm asking you tonight to suspend any commitments, any financial votes on any financial commitments that we would have to adhere to new board of directors. So that's all I want to do is I want to second that. I've got 3 new directors that are all technically competent guys, me included, and we think we can evaluate going forward any proposals. So what we're asking is that hopefully on the back of your boards and just defer any commitments that you may propose to make or plan on making until the new boards can put feet on the ground and go with that.
Would you mind telling me what, I didn't hear what you said in terms of mud. What mud?
I'm MUD 36.
Oh, thanks, sir.
Steve Lawrence.
Trustees, my name is Steve Lawrence. I'm the precinct chair, GOP precinct chair for precinct 48. Also MUD 1 director elect. And actually, the 2 gentlemen before me said exactly what is on my mind as well. I think we have a mandate from the voters. I think that occurred less than a week ago, and it's probably a good idea to take that mandate and maybe go with it this meeting. Would encourage directors to trustees to pass on any changes that may you may plan for timeframes or anything like that. Thank you very much.
Steve. Walt. What is it? Belsky. Chesney. Noise.
He's having, getting his notes. Thank you. Gotta get my notes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
My name is Walt Maszewski. I'm president of MUD 1. And you have to bear with me. I wrote this last night, so I don't have everything memorized. But losing an election due to deceptive tactics used by other candidates is disheartening, to say the least. When falsehood and manipulation overshadows truth and integrity, it tarnishes the process, and it erodes public trust in the system. As candidates, we have a personal responsibility to engage in an honest forum and be transparent and respect the intelligence of the voter. Voters also rely on MUD directors that know what they're doing, what their skills are, and what it takes to be a MUD director. When you talk to a candidate that has never even been to a meeting, but has done nothing but watched it on YouTube, from a voter standpoint, I would be concerned about that. If the It undermines the credibility of the electoral process. But most of all, the thing that I want to emphasize is that the manipulation of excerpts from tape meetings and presenting as factual final policy is false information, and it blatantly disregards for truth and ethics. The Texas Open Meeting Act requires that a meeting be posted 72 hours in advance. Item 14 on the March agenda was so that we could review the pros and cons of various funding options for water and sanitary projects for the next 10 years. It was an open and transparent discussion for exploring options for further decisions and to help identify potential operational or challenges associated with each of these options and to consider the long-term implications of each option. They end up telling residents that their bills will double and the proposed property tax increases for new debt is resorting to deception and to gain political advantage. It's not only unethical, but it also damages the fabric of our society. In the face of such deceptive tactics, it's essential for the residents to critically evaluate the information presented to them and hold the directors accountable for their action. Ultimately, the strength of our community lies in the ability and the discernment of our residents and separation of truth from falsehood. Finally, though, let me emphasize that we should all be reminded that the pursuit of power at any cost is ultimately going to diminish all of us. Let us reconnect ourselves with the idea of honesty, integrity, and to the common pursuit of the betterment for the Woodlands. Thank you very much for your time.
Pam, Thoughton, briefly.
Yes, I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank Woodlands Water, and I wanted to thank the board of Mud 36 for the privilege of serving. I've learned so much, and I'm so impressed with the integrity of everybody, including Woodlands Water and the SJRA. And I hope to be able perhaps to serve again. And thank you so much.
And Art, we have this. Put it back, Josh.
Yes, I'm the trustee for Mud One. And my congratulations to the victors of the recent Mud elections. Concurrently, I acknowledge my defeat and ultimate departure from my 39 years as a trustee. Having worked alongside 6 general managers and a host of outstanding WWA employees, I have been exceptionally impressed by the professionalism and dedication of the staff. I am convinced that the current team is the best since the formation of the JPA, now WWA, since its inception on July 26, 1982. The patience of the staff in advising, educating, and listening to the concerns and opinions of directors has been exceptional, as has been their ability to incorporate suggestions as appropriate. It has been an honor and a joy and a privilege to know such remarkable individuals, and I wish them the best.
Did I miss anybody? That's all I got on the list. Okay, we'll move on to item 4. Update on Region H. Perfect.
Mr. President, trustees, and the public. Tonight I'm here to report on Region H Water Planning Group. We had our second quarter meeting on May 1st and want to provide some updates of what took place at that meeting. Meeting was both administrative and technical planning methods that we covered in the meeting. As far as administration goes, Aubrey Spears, who is the general manager of SJRA, was voted in as a voting member on Region H, and his role is he's the representative for river authorities. We also had a nomination to the executive committee. Arthur Bredehoff was nominated to the executive committee. So the Woodlands community has a member of Region H that will be on the executive committee. I think that's good for the Woodlands, and it continues the presence of the Woodlands on Region H's planning committee. Our chairman was reconfirmed. Our chairman is Judge Mark Evans, and he was reconfirmed for another term as our chairman. Mark Evans is also the chairperson of the Interregional Planning Group. And what the Interregional Planning Group is, that's the group that has a member from all 16 regions that makes up the water planning group in the state of Texas. And Judge Evans and his planning group reported out to their findings that were presented to the Texas Water Development Board. And Shelley will have a complete packet of Region H. All the details of our meeting will be on your G drive for your perusal at your convenience. We also had the technical part of the meeting, and the city of Montgomery requested an amendment to the 21-25 Region H's planning document. And the reason they came forward to request a minor amendment is that they are planning for growth, and they have some new water infrastructure that they want to apply for grants down at the Texas Water Development Board. But in order to do that, we had to approve some minor amendments to our existing plan. And the areas that they're looking at, they're putting in a new water plant with some additional storage. This is also for current and future needs. It's very interesting to see some of the members of Region H starting to plan for the future, look at new infrastructure because of the growth that's taken place specifically in Montgomery County. Another technical part is that we had our consultant present information on water conservation and drought contingency plans. Texas Water Development Board is putting more focus in the plan for 26 to 31 on water conservation methodology and also on drought contingency. As we all know, the supply of water is not going to substantially grow as it relates to where population is growing. So conservation is going to be a big part of the next plan, and drought contingency plans are also going to be a big part of our plan. The Woodlands has always been on the leading edge of conservation. The question for this community is, what are we going to do next? How are we going to take our bar and move it out further? You're starting to see a lot of organizations, cities, MUDs look at contingency plans for droughts, and they seem to be copying some of the stuff that we have done over the last 12 years. So I think we have the opportunity going forward to take the bar we have now and raise that bar as it relates to conservation. Another technical part of the meeting was Region H has a requirement that any time our budget changes, whether it's line items that change, we go back and have that change approved by the full planning board. So we did that this time. We had some budget items that we completed that part of the planning cycle. We had some surplus. We moved it to other planning lines that we need to complete the plan. But we're very diligent on making sure we stay within $2.4 million for our budget. As you well know, we're funded by the Texas Water Development Board. They fund all the regions to produce the plan, and that plan, once it's approved, goes into the total state plan. And then we had some timelines that we took a look at, and we're still on track. We were advised that January 1st, 25 starts the 89th Texas legislature. So the regional planning groups will be getting together and putting together some items that we want the legislature to take a look at in the 89th session. March of 25, our initial plan has to be completed so we can present that to the Texas Water Development Board. And in October of 25, the final plan has to be completed and presented to the Texas Water Development Board. So far, we are on track, and it's good that we're on track, and our consultant helps keep us there. Our next quarterly meeting will be August the 7th, and then I'll come back to the trustee board in the August meeting and report out what we did in our third quarter. And we had Eric Peterson was there in the audience, and Eric updated the regional planning group on the developments that are taking place in this community as it relates to One Water. So it was good to have Eric there and report that out. That's I would conclude my report. The board.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Was reuse discussed in some of the forward-looking planning activities that Region H will be doing?
Reuse has been talked about. It may be in some of the strategies that our consultant will present as we move forward for the final plan.
Okay.
Also, what was talked about in the first quarter was about carbon reuse that industry is taking a look at. And we allocated some budget monies to take a look at strategies about carbon reuse, zero carbon. Challenges with some of those strategies are those technology with that uses a lot of water, but industry wanted to start to take a look at that. Some members said push it off for the next plan. The group consensus was let's look at it now for the 26-31. Okay, you had a question?
I did not, I just said thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Moving on to consent agreement, items 5 and 6, minutes. And the monthly reports. Everybody read those, we understand.
Move to accept as presented.
Motion, we have a second?
Second.
You have a second? Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 7, monthly SDRA.
Well, good evening. I do not have a packet, so I don't have the report in front of me, but y'all do. So do you have any questions on the report that was passed out in the packet? All right.
The 12-inch water, page 15, everyone, starting there. The 12-inch water. Main break, Pacific and full share. And on page 16, it's indicated the boring contractor had hit the line.
Correct.
That is correct. But it also notes that, I'll quote here, no locates called in SJRA or WWA offices.
Correct.
Are you saying that 311, number where you're supposed to locate pipes?
The 811 was not called in. The
Okay.
line locate was not called in by the contractor when they started their work.
Okay, what plans are there then to recover costs of repair and, the amount of the 119,000 gallons?
We've already sent them a bill.
Okay,
It was prepared the same day, and so we took that invoice that we got, we automatically gave it to our risk department, who sent it to them.
okay,
And so usually we're not successful in getting those, but the last one, maybe two, we have received back. So risk is currently tracking this down to get reimbursed for us. Any other questions on the report?
yes, I do have a
Okay.
page 23. Right at the very bottom, I believe something must have got cut off from the table. It says L look at 47 cash. See that?
Oh, I do. See, I tried to switch up the format and change it portrait instead of landscape so we could all read it better, but
Okay.
all right.
Is that, some kind of elevated tank?
Elevated storage tank number 6.
Okay,
That's actually in Mud 47, and this is actually under design at this point in time. So this is at the corner of Egypt and Research Forest.
okay,
For the one that's just put in there monument design.
it was the new one.
The new one, correct.
What about the coordination?
Coordination?
Right.
Yes, that was the next item if there were no more questions on the report. Yes, sir.
On page 16.
Yes, sir.
The advisory for wastewater treatment plant number 1. There's a number of the invoice today. Can you explain what that should be?
Page 16.
It's 20, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, okay. It's not a. And for, which one again, I'm sorry?
It's wastewater treatment plant number one.
Master
There's a
plan?
number in the middle that doesn't make sense. What it is.
Would you mind if you show me which one it was?
The 1,5240
On page 20.
invoice today. Oh, the owner advisor.
Oh, I got you. We were missing a zero at the end.
The misplaced comma or?
Misplaced comma. It's misplaced comma. That should be 15,240.
Are you on page 20?
On page 20.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay.
Page 31. DRC operating repair and replacement. And from,
Yes, sir.
like an explanation on how we get negative revenue. 6,477,000 for the month of March. Negative.
I will pass it over to see if Jamie is back there and can see.
Is that the rebate thing that's working?
I believe it has to do with the rebate, but I would like to see it.
They're gonna be in or April, yes, in April.
So explain how you, what is that? And how is it done?
So the rebates are, we had excess funds in the operating funds for the GRP division that were caused by,
The drop.
the drought in 2023. And then there was, so the excess was designated, and then they determined that the best course of action was to take $12 million of that, pay off existing bond funds with some of that. And then we took the remainder and did a rebate to the participants in the GRP program. So the rebate was based on usage from the prior fiscal year. That's how it was determined.
Okay, so that's just a one-time entry in the month of March. Then
That's
go
correct.
back to normal accounting and reporting.
That's correct.
Showing-
One-time rebate, and then those they were credits to the account, so they're being applied as they use them.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the?
Sure. Y'all go too fast for me. On the boring and the contractor. So they don't have to call 311? Is that what's saying?
Legally, they have to.
Legally, you say?
Legally, per the railroad commission, they have to call.
Right, okay. Thank you, that's what I thought.
So last week, the storms that came through, Thursday was the bulk of it. Friday, we had a little bit more, as everybody here knows, not gonna repeat that. Wastewater plant one got the blunt, of what came down. We had 8 inches in 9 hours. So that is far more than we received in Harvey on day 1, 2, 3, whatever, not cumulative, just in this high intensity. Due to that, wastewater plant one does have a violation that you will see next month. The 2-hour peak flow is 18 million gallons per day permitted. We actually hit about 26 if memory serves. So we're over what we call the 40% rule, 18 times 40%, 25.2. We're over that number. So we did report it to TCEQ that day, as well as 5 days later, in violation for that. More importantly, though, for y'all to know is when the rain came down, that's a 2-hour peak. So you take a 2-hour window throughout the day, and what's the highest 2 hours throughout the day? The actual flow through the plant instantaneous was about 32 million gallons. So that 8 inches in 9 hours that was on Thursday, the plant flow went from about 3.5 million gallons a day, went up to 32 million gallons. That's the big thing that happened at wastewater plant one. Wastewater plants 2 and 3 did not get as much rain. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know there was no violations at those facilities. So that was the wastewater system. Water system, we had a lightning strike on Friday that occurred at water plant 3 off of Alden Bridge. that lightning strike, when it went down, of course, you can imagine a lot of sensitive instrumentation, so it blew out some instrumentation at the plant. So we go to the site and we check it out, and we have chlorine chlorinators that feed the chlorine into the system. Check those, they are working just fine. We also check the chlorine sensors. Those are the ones that, you feed in the chlorine and the sensor tells you how much is in the water. Those were working just fine. So there was other items at the site that were messed up, so we went ahead and fixed those items. We also rechecked everything before we left the site. Everything was working, everything was reporting in. Monday morning, we found out that there was apparently a glitch and it was not working. So it was calling out when we left, everything was going just fine. But what had happened was that chlorinator, it was the one that was working when lightning struck. So we believe the lightning went through the water, disconnected to the water, ran up through the sensor and basically froze it in the on position. So whatever it was feeding at that point in time is what it continuously fed the entire duration of the weekend. Okay. At the same time, the analyzer that was recording it, it goes to 3 decimal places. It's stuck at that same 3 or the same 2, but the last one is the only one that changed it. So it did not get a status alarm that says it's frozen. So the lightning strike caused the high chlorination throughout the weekend. So what you'll see also next month is, as soon as we found out about it Monday morning, which was about 10 or 11 a.m., we shut off the plant, started diluting down the water, and started flushing the system about 2, 3 o'clock with Woodlands Water's help. We started at 3 a.m. and we finished Tuesday about 8 a.m. And so, not in violation. TCQ allows the chlorine to go higher. It's an annual average for the year, so there's no violations. But what you will see is we did flush 15, almost 16 million gallons out of that area. So the water loss for next month, you will see a 15 to 16 million gallon water loss just in that 12 to 18 hour period. So chlorine residuals were high. As of Tuesday around noon at the latest, back in normal operation. So questions?
We did send out a notification. We felt it was important to send out something to the affected areas. Actually, we sent it out to the entire Woodlands and then noted that it was more in the northern areas, and what they would expect and that the water was safe, and that when you see quite a bit of fire hydrants open, that's why. That's the majority of the calls that we got, was that folks driving around saw a lot of fire hydrants open.
And I have talked to our SCADA department, kind of figuring out, okay, this happened, what could we stop it from happening again? We're looking to put some additional sensors in next year. It's already in the budget for next year. We're looking to see if we can put some in this year, not just at the facility, but further out into the system as well. So there's some additional fail safes we've done, contacting labs and so on and so forth. We had the belt, it didn't work. So now we have belt and suspenders, and y'all have ideas or thoughts, please let us know. We'd be glad to listen to them. Yes, sir. Good question.
Is there also a manual way to check the chlorine levels other than relying on sensors? Do you have something to calibrate to or check it?
We do. When we're on site, when we checked it to make sure it wasn't just to look at it and see, we actually have pocket colorimeters. I never say the word, that's why I don't say it. But we actually pull those out and test water right there. So it was working the both times we checked it, just not sure when it actually decided it wanted to fry. So.
Given that the lightning bolt went through the water, surge protection system that would normally protect the electrical side would not be of any assistance here.
It would not have. I've had this happen in other plants I was at, and path of least resistance, it travels the water line up to and it starts blowing out the components. Appreciate that. That is all I have, unless you have any questions on anything I can try to answer. All right, thank you.
Moving on to item 8, receive information from SKRA. Reason to.
So good evening, everybody. For those that are here that don't know me, I'm Dan Hildebrand, Technical Services Department Manager, River Authority. I do want to introduce David Munn tonight. He is a professional engineer with Priest and Nickel, also a project manager that's been working with us approximately the past 3 years on the wastewater strategic plan. What he will be presenting on tonight is discussed at the last trustee meeting. And the task that was authorized to look at a partial rehab option versus building a new wastewater treatment facility and what a delay could potentially look like, and looking at the net present value analysis. So with that, I will pass it off to David and go from there.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Good to see y'all again. Dan did a great job of kind of setting the stage. Just to say a little bit more about that, there were a couple questions that y'all asked me to help answer at the last meeting. There's this idea of potentially rehabbing the plant to doing a partial rehab, I'll say, to allow the plant replacement to be deferred further into the future. So, for example, if we defer the plant 18 months into the future, what kind of equipment needs to be replaced in the meantime? What kind of rehab would be required in the meantime? The other alternative was, what if we went beyond 18 months? What if we went maybe as far as 5 years into the future? What kind of rehab would be required? Really, the question comes down to, in order to get the benefit of deferring that plant replacement into the future, what kind of cost am I going to have to pay today? And the big question, and I want to underline that phrase because I'll be using it a lot. The big question is it more economically advantageous for the citizens to pay for that rehab now and defer the plant? Or is it more economically advantageous to just go ahead and move forward with the major plant replacement and just forget about the rehab? So that's kind of where I left you guys last time. Dan passed out 3 pages. The first 2 pages is a list of improvements that would be required either in an 18-month deferment or a 18 to 5-year deferment. So you'll see that there are 2 columns. If it's required for the 18-month, we'll see a price in that first kind of darker blue column. If it is only required if we go beyond 18 months, say up to 5 years, then it's in that second lighter blue column. So that's what you're seeing. I'll say that this is a partial list. As we said last time, we didn't think that we needed to go through the effort of doing what's called a full class 5 estimate, where you really, get down into the details of it. In order to answer that big question, we just felt that we needed to identify enough of the cost. So an important caveat that I want to put on this is not the full estimate. If y'all say, hey, if I wanted to do the rehab, how much would it cost? Don't look at the bottom of this page and expect that's going to be all that it is, because this is the cost that we have estimated today, which may not be the full cost at the end of the day, but as we said last time, we think that we have accounted for enough of the cost to answer the big question. Okay, so wanted to point that important caveat out. Let's get back to kind of how we put these costs together. So we started with a list of 24 items. This will tie back to a slide that Chris and Dan had presented previously. Talking with them, we think that that's a really good list. That's a good start. If you wanted to do the full rehab, that list may grow a little bit, but we think that that is a really good start and served as the basis of this table. So what we did was we wanted to work quickly and efficiently. We didn't want to spend a lot of time, a lot of the citizens' resources. We wanted to kind of put this together quick and efficient. So what we did was we looked for similar recent projects where we either have contractor quotes or equipment vendor quotes at least. And so, we thought by getting those real world prices, that would add some level of confidence to the estimate. So what I put in here for you, the 2 rightmost columns, we have the source cost, which some of this stuff may not be meaningful to you. When I write down the ITX proposal for the headworks, Dan, Chris, and I, Connie, we all know exactly what that is.
But what's more important for you is maybe that second column to know that, okay, that is a price from a contractor for a similar project. I'll use that as an example just to kind of dive in a little bit more there. Item number one, the Headworks concrete coating and repair. Well, these guys, they just did a Headworks coating and repair job at a different treatment plant. So and it just did, I think, within the last month or so. So very, up-to-date cost, very similar project. We took and we just scaled off, well, how many square feet were they rehabbing there? How many square feet are we rehabbing here? And we adjusted the price accordingly. We did put a little bit of contingency in there just because every job is different. But that is the method that we took to build up these costs. I'm not going to go through every one, but I did just want to give you an idea of how the costs were developed. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the second page.
So
Yes,
the
ma'am.
costs we're looking at are, this is not a project that's been executed, but this is the estimate that you have for 2024 price. Is that correct?
When you say this, are you
I'm
talking?
looking at the top one that you talked about.
That top one, so the project that we referenced,
Uh-huh,
that project has not been complete,
uh-huh.
but it has been bid. So the SJRA, they put that out on the street, multiple contractors bid. ITX was the low bidder. And their project was, I think is like $1.2, $1.3 million. I'm going off of memory there, but very, very similar. So that project has not been complete, but that is a contractor's hard bid estimate.
So how long is that gonna take?
Follow up more with your question, Betty. What's listed there for plant one has not been executed, that's not even been bid. That's just an estimate of what plant one might cost.
So we can't be real confident about that price holding once we get further into the execution of that. Is that?
Yeah, and so the answer is yes, we can't be 100% confident, but I'll kind of remind you that the big question here is, do we know enough about the cost to be confident that we can make a decision that it is either economically beneficial to defer the plant or not economically beneficial? And I think you'll see here later on that, okay, we know enough about the cost, we're close enough that I think a decision can be clearly made there.
Before you move on, can you just tell me what the factors were between columns 1 and 2, well, not columns, but 18 months and greater than 18 months? What are the factors that drove the increase in the prices? Was it interest or inflation? What makes the differential in those prices?
Yeah, great question. So greater than 18 months, we were using the same terminology that has been presented before. But to run the analysis, you have to pick a number, right? It can't just be greater than 18 months. We think that this second column represents if a rehab was done to defer the plant by 18 months to 5 years. We picked a midpoint of 3 years to run our analysis. So to specifically answer your question, the difference in that cost of 1.1 million to 1.18, let's say, that's just escalation from 18 months up to 3 years. So it's purely, you might call it inflation, we call it escalation. Okay, any more questions before
A couple of them, and just because I'm kind of going to get this information to connect, couldn't be here tonight. A couple of things that you wanted me to ask. To confirm that this analysis uses MBR technology and it also assumes it's going to be built on the adjacent property?
That is the basis of the second half of the discussion that I'm going to have when we compare the rehab of your existing plant to the new plant.
Yeah.
The new plant is still using the same cost that came out of phase 2, which is based on the MBR technology.
Okay, and then also wanted me to ask that how the sensitivity analysis affected the outcome? And do you feel that you stretched the sensitivity analysis enough to account for some less likely but more extreme scenarios?
Okay, hold on. Diane, I think that, let us get through the rest of this because we're not to the sensitivity analysis yet.
Okay.
So
Got it.
let's keep going. Let David present the rest of what's in here because I think some of your questions may get answered.
Yeah,
So, okay.
definitely gonna talk about the sensitivity analysis. Okay, great questions, Diane. And anybody else? All right, so let's turn to the second page and you'll see two numbers at the bottom of the page. One is 8.5 million and the other one is 33.2 million. So what this is saying is that if you want to defer the construction of the replacement plant by 18 months, there are things that you have to do right now. There's some Band-Aids that would have to be put on that existing plant to buy you the time. Those Band-Aids cost about $8.5 million at least. More than likely, that cost would go up as we continue to do cost analysis. At this point in time, if you wanted to defer the plant by as much as, say, 5 years, the amount of Band-Aids that would have to be put on the plant is $33.3 million. That's largely driven by the construction of replacement basins for aeration basin 1 and 2 and the air system associated with that. You may have heard me say in the past that right now, 2 separate engineering studies by other engineers have demonstrated that you're currently below your permitted capacity for average day flow. And I believe that you're right on the line of needing those additional basins. And so there is a sense of urgency to that.
How did that impact this flooding?
It would not have because there's 2 different types of capacity in a treatment plant. There's the average day capacity where the dry, municipal load is coming in just on an average day. It's fairly concentrated. During wet weather, it's mostly rainwater, right? So you get a lot of water coming into the plant, but it's very, very dilute. You've got different processes that handle wet weather versus the biological load. So this wet weather event wouldn't have impacted what I just said. Okay, so those additional basins is what's driving that $33 million number there. So remember those 2 numbers, 8.5 million and 33.3 million. Let's now look to the third page. We're going to see it has a graph that looks like this. Okay, so I'm going to explain maybe the purpose of this graph and how to read it. And then I'm going to come back and explain what went into developing it. All right, so basically what we're trying to do is to figure out, okay, is it a better use of your money to invest in this rehab and defer the new plant out further into the future? Or is it a better use of your money to just go ahead and go with the replacement? So the way you would read this graph is the green line kind of demonstrates the break point, okay? If the cost of your rehab is below that line, it's a good thing. It means, yeah, go ahead and do that rehab, defer out into the future. If the cost of your rehab is above that green line, then that's suggesting, no, it's better to go ahead and just go with the replacement now rather than, investing money in a sunk cost in terms of the rehab. So that's how we read that graph. Let me kind of go down into a little bit more detail of how that's developed. Okay, so on the x-axis, so the bottom axis of this graph, it's demonstrating the number of years full replacement plant is delayed. So, we've got 1.5, which is 18 months. We've got 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And so that is the delay in which the treatment plant is completed. I'll remind y'all that these projects are big projects. They take a long time to design and construct. Currently, the plan is the new plant would be finished in the year 2030. So when we say delay it by 3 years, that's not 3 years from today. That would be finishing it in the year 2033. Along the y-axis is cost, okay? And so I'll just take, for example, here, this first data point of 1.5. If we were to delay it out 1.5 years, it would make sense to do that if you only had to invest, that's probably around $4.8 million. The cost of your rehab to defer the plant by 18 months was $4.8 million. I would say go do it. In this instance, though, to defer it by 18 months, it's costing 8.5 million. So that's far north of that line. And like I said earlier, we haven't even added up all the costs yet. But just adding up what we've gotten easily, the low hanging fruit, we're already well north of that line. Let's go add a little bit more. If we were wanting to delay it from 3 years to 5 years, we're tremendously north of the line now. So let's shift our attention to the line itself. It has this inflection point, right? It starts out around 4.8, but then goes down to 0, and it then climbs from there. So you may be wondering, well, what's going on there? How was this line developed? Well, there's a couple different forces, I'll say, that are dictating how that line moves. One is the comparison of inflation versus the interest on the bonds. If your inflation is higher than the interest on your bonds, it's going to drive that line down. Another instance or another force is for the baseline of the plant replacement. We're assuming 2 years of capitalized interest, where you're basically borrowing money for the first 2 payments. That is not included in the alternatives. And then the third thing that's really affecting the shape of that line is the replacement cycle. So once you build this new facility, it's not going to be good forever, right? You're going to have to come back and replace it. We're assuming every 20 years, we're swapping out, replacing major mechanical and electrical gear, okay? If you defer that further and further and further out in the future, that's less times you're going to have to replace that equipment. And so that's a good thing, right? So if we're able to defer things way out into the future and not have to pay for that replacement, that means that we can afford to invest more in the plant now in order to achieve that deferral. That's why that line, as you go defer it further out into the future, that's why that line goes up. It's saying, yeah, if you could spend less than 25 million to defer it 10 years, that would be a great thing. But unfortunately, we can't. We already know, even to delay it 3 to 5 years, we're already spending 33.
David, I think one basic assumption here is that you can't just continue to patch and repair the existing plant. What this assumes is that you have to replace it someday. Maybe 10 years, maybe 18 months, but you have to replace it because what's there won't continue to last, which is repairs.
Right. And another way of saying that is based on what we've seen out at the plant. Look, these guys are working hard to patch and repair what they have. We've been through, 20 years of patch and repair, and it's getting to be that time where it makes sense. Okay, I'm not going to keep investing in my car that's falling apart. After a while, it's just time to get a new car. And that's what the economic analysis is suggesting.
The aeration phase is 1 and 2.
Yes, sir.
Are they the
Those are the units that are non-conservative. Yes.
What's driving us to bring those units back in service and take it out of service many years ago?
Right.
What's driving that decision?
So, Basin 1 was taken out many years ago. Basin 2 was taken out Chris, we remember when Basin Two was taken out. And Basin Two, was it taken out more recently, or am I misunderstanding that?
So Basin One was taken out of service actually quite earlier than that. Basin Two was in 2011. But Basin Two was taken out of service kind of temporarily because we do need it occasionally with high flows. And so we have floating aerators that we can put in and take out. So 2, maybe 3 years ago is when it was actually finally taken out of service.
Yeah, okay, awesome, thanks, Chris. Basically, where we are is looking at, prior studies, prior process modeling that's been done by other engineers. It shows that you guys are borderline in terms of having sufficient capacity. And so that's what's driving it.
Thank you. Say borderline having sufficient capacity. Is that, I mean, my impression is that a new plant, a plant, is putting myself on a level of special capacity.
I didn't hear that.
Pretty much a level of the new one is similar to the old one in terms of capacity. Right.
And we actually, through our optimization, feel that the new plant can be less than the existing plant's permitted capacity. So what's on paper is the plant should be able to treat 7.8 on paper. That's if all the basins are in service. We felt that through optimization, looking at it, we could actually go down from that. So the new plant would actually be a little smaller than your existing plant if all basins were in service. Now, all basins aren't in service, so that existing plant can probably treat somewhere, I'm guessing, I'm not guessing, roughly around 3 to say 3.3 million gallons per day.
That's been satisfactory for how long?
It's the
Since 2011.
the Basin Two was providing some capacity, so it was higher than 3.3 until 2 years ago. About the time that COVID happened, and there was a drop in the loading. And so since that drop occurred and Basin Two is out of service, we're now like borderline at capacity.
So the motivation that in greater than 18 months that we need to bring back in service Basins 1 and 2.
Right.
And not right now.
Because of the duration that it takes to construct these facilities, the fact that there is capacity in the community, meaning the houses, the offices, they're there, right? It's not like we're in a developing community where we're waiting for houses to be built. The houses, the buildings are there. The occupancy is low. So as soon as people return from the COVID levels, you would be under capacity.
So we go over the right.
So
There has been a lot of growth.
right, but before COVID, you had treatment, you had Basin Two in service, and you did have higher loads, and you were able to accommodate it. Now you don't have Basin Two in service, so your capacity has gone down. Now, fortunately, your loading also went down whenever the office space is kind of vacated. But again, it takes many years to build this additional capacity, and it would not take that much time for the commercial space to refill. You know, if the economy, the market went that way.
I'm curious, the clarifiers. What mechanical we have, and what we have, clarify 3, and then but the only one, item 8 clarifiers 1 and 2. So the mechanical device is a gearbox.
So in this one, we assumed a full mechanical replacement. So not just the gearbox, it's the entire mechanism. So sludge collector, scum collector, more than just a gearbox. The gearbox would be a small part of it, which these guys probably could replace on
But I
that.
remember in your technical assessment, you mentioned the replacement. The gearbox that clarifies, that's like $45,000.
Right.
But what's motivating, from the technical assessment to now to go from $45,000 to the 3.1 million?
It's to, the phase one assessment, which you're referring to, had mentioned that the staff was gonna replace a gearbox on a clarifier, which the price for them to replace that gearbox is, roughly $60,000 or so. No labor, you don't have to take it out of service, there's no bypass, so a totally different animal. What we're saying now is, okay, if you're gonna defer this by 18 months into the future, 5 years into the future, those mechanisms are are at the end of their life and need to be replaced. So it's an apples to oranges comparison.
So the clarifier will put in mid-90s.
Mhm.
And so those mechanisms are the original to the clarifier and installed in the mid-90s.
That's my understanding.
And,
Yeah.
they typically have what, a 30-year life,
20-year life,
30-year life,
or 20-year life.
20 life.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I guess the question, I mean, I don't know how to get the answer on this, but, we're talking about mechanical and electrical elements.
Mhm.
The other plant, they have a 50-year life, but most mechanical and electrical elements have, what, 10, 15, 20-year life, so they're a different life cycle.
Right, 20-year life.
I mean, they want a different life cycle, so when you start talking about the value, one thing I found a little lacking in the analysis, you always say, find the, the remaining useful life, but you don't talk about the in-service date. And so, you start looking at this stuff, and here's a set of values that go with the existing equipment, right? They have to have a life.
Mhm.
I don't know where we're at that line. I just see, that's 5 years, 8 years. The question I have is, if you're giving up that value to, like, and you're building new, so you would take those clarifiers and give another 20-year life. Like, the saying is that it's mechanical, electrical. Like, when you redo them, it's not like they have a 3-year life, they have another 20-year life. So I guess I'm a little, surprised when we started investing in this plan. We have one of those items where we're adding another, let's just say, 20-year life to the mechanical equipment. So I get a little, I get a little cold when I start, hearing, you look at this and you say, well, this is 18 months, but all these items are going to spend the life of the equipment far beyond 18 months. Like, far beyond 18 months is going to extend the equipment to its new renewal date, starting 20 years out. So I guess
Then you have lots of other pieces of equipment that are beyond their useful life that are things. I mean, are you guys taking into account the useful life and the in-service date on all these parts?
We did, absolutely. That information is in the phase one report. It's in the appendices. There's a list of all the pieces of equipment, their original life.
You guys considered all that.
We've
This
considered
is
all
not a new thing.
that. It's not, no.
So I think I want to come back to the question that Diane asked earlier on behalf of you. I believe the question, not the sensitivity analysis, but the first question was, this was based on the assumption that the membrane plant, there's going to be a new facility constructed. So the assumption with this analysis is, if you defer for 18 months past 2030 and still go build the plant, because that's what we're planning to do, these are the costs that will be incurred. So it will be a sunk cost. So David, to your point, you would gain more time, but you'd take it offline within the next 3 years because we would be constructing the new plant. So it is a loss of significant life. We're with you. We wouldn't recommend to put in any of this infrastructure, which is why we pulled it off our project plans. It doesn't show up on any of our 10-year plans anymore because it doesn't make sense to do both. You need to choose a path. And so our recommendation and what we've brought to y'all is to do the new plant on the new property with the membrane plant, right? And so that's the plan. If you were to defer, so if you go back to the presentations that Dan, Aaron Schindelwolf, and I gave that were the 10-year project plan meetings in the last month, 2 months ago. We gave that schedule and then we presented the left column and the right column. And so this is consistent with those slides. So just to, I think, try to answer your question, David.
So if we talk about the membrane, in the existing plan, what does that replace? That replace to clarify, tell me, technically how, what the membrane does, that the existing plan does.
So to keep it really simple, the MBR, the membranes will replace both the clarifier and the filters.
Again, I haven't read a lot, but someone handed me an article just recently talking about, the sludge collection in the membrane clogging up and people having trouble with membrane versus with clarifier and filter. I guess if you discuss that a little bit, I haven't really read that article. Someone handed it to me and it was a article good for membrane because they're involved. You can speak of unclog.
Yeah, so with any process, there's going to be pros and cons, things that are more challenging with one versus the other. And so one of the things that you do have to be mindful of with MPRs, with membranes, is making sure that your solids load on the membranes themselves doesn't get too concentrated. You do operate these at a very high concentration. Which is why you're able to make them smaller, which is why you're able to save so much money on concrete and steel, which is one of the things that we've seen the most escalation in our industry. But along with that comes, disadvantages, and making sure that you're able to keep your membranes free of accumulating too much solids on the membrane is something to be mindful of. I could talk just as long about issues like bulking sludge with clarifiers. All processes are going to have pros and cons to them. But if I can get back to the analysis at hand, which really you could consider it, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to think of this as MBR versus rehab. You could think of it as new plant versus rehab. We were simply here, and what I'm presenting on today is an analysis of, is it a better use of the citizens' money to buy some of these Band-Aids, invest in this rehab so that you can defer the plant? And the analysis is showing resoundingly no, that would not be the economically wise thing to do.
And that was the question that was the chore you assigned.
That was the chore I was assigned.
Are you planning on giving this presentation at individual mud meetings?
I'm going to do whatever these guys
I
ask
think-
me to.
I think we plan to provide this information packet. We'll be there to answer questions.
Trustee Smith, if you could defer the rest of your questions.
Okay.
Do we want to try to answer Diane's second
Yes.
question? Okay. What, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can jump into that now.
Okay.
That was something I did want to touch on. So the last time we were here, one of the trustees said very wisely, hey, let's make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what escalation you're going to assume, what interest rate you're going to assume. Those two things have tremendous impact on the outcome of this. So we said, okay, for escalation, we're going to assume between 5% to 4.5%. For bond interest rate, we're going to assume 3.75%. All the results that you're seeing here carry forward with those numbers. The SJRA said, well, what if we're a little bit wrong about that? What if it's a little higher? What if it's a little lower? Let's make sure that the answer to the MUD's questions doesn't change. So we did what's called a sensitivity analysis, where we went to the extremes. What if for the next 50 years, escalation stayed at 7% per year? What if the bond rate for the next 50 years stays at 7%? What are these extremes that we could potentially wildly imagine? And does that change the answer to the question? And the answer is that it does not. We did the sensitivity analysis, we played around with some of the different variables, and the answer stays the same. It makes sense to not spend further money on the rehab to only get 1.5 to 3 years worth of deferral.
If we have to build a new plant instead of the back for the tax.
That is correct.
Are you also saying that, in sensitivity analysis, so you're saying basically regardless of inflation, the decision remains the same?
Within the numbers that we assumed, which went up to 7%,
Numbers you've already built into this analysis.
not only the numbers that we built into the analysis, but when we kind of went up to the different extremes, to defer by 3 years, the answer stays the same. Now, there is a point where you could continue increasing escalation to something really high. And if you looked into those outer years, okay, maybe I defer it by 20 years or so, then there is going to be a point where rehab could make sense if you're able to defer it that far, and if the assumptions, escalation, inflation, interest rate stay at the wild ends of the extreme, which
The previous statement said we have to spend now to get ahead of inflation. Really don't know what the decision. I mean, people were saying, if we don't spend now, it's costing us $1 million a year because of a month because of inflation. But your sensitivity analysis doesn't show that, does it? I mean, the wise decision is what's needed, regardless of the time it takes the body to digest that decision.
Oh, no, I fully disagree with that. I fully disagree. You said regardless of inflation.
Well, within the sensitivity analysis.
No, not within the sensitivity analysis. No, within the sensitivity analysis, if you assume those amounts, then it makes sense to do the replacement now.
I think the confusion maybe, and I was a little confused at first, is that you built in this analysis with a 5% inflation and a 3.5% interest.
Right.
And then you stretched that out to possibly the maximum limits at 7. I guess the question was, based on that sensitivity analysis, does the answer change as to whether or not to replace or not replace? But the numbers would certainly change.
The numbers certainly change. The answer of should I defer it by 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, that does not change.
The red dots stay on the left side of any line we could come up with to plot. Is that the easiest way?
The red dots move.
The red dots,
Numbers.
the red dots aren't moving. The green line is moving around. So if you created an envelope that is, the most conservative and epically crazy, that green line can go up and be closer to the red, but it never gets on the other side, which is where it becomes economically feasible to go ahead and defer.
Right.
So does that answer that question, you think, Diane, for?
Oh, okay. And then what cost items got escalated and which did not, like design costs, construction, labor?
So all of them got escalated. The construction cost gets escalated as you move it further out into the future. And so the design cost would also then escalate if you push the design further into the future.
And why is that escalating?
As you push things further into the future, why does it escalate? Is that what you're asking? So maybe the term escalation is confusing. Maybe inflation would be a better word.
Again, the time value of money, things in the future cost, maybe cost more, but the value is different.
If the SJRA was able to take and invest this $290 million in the stock market and make 18% in the stock market, then what you're saying may be true, but the SJRA can't do that. So the discount rate, the discount portion of the NPV analysis is set at the basically the bond rate, which is what they would be saving by deferring it.
We legally cannot.
I know that. And you can't borrow money and throw it away.
Miss Betty,
Yeah.
Miss Betty.
Do we need to vote on this today?
Oh,
Will there be opportunities for the new directors to get up to speed on all of this, like we spent the last, 3 years on the details of this? Will that be made available by SJRA?
Yes, ma'am. I believe
Okay,
we are planning to do
So
some learning.
here's what I think I'm hearing and feeling and perceiving, and that is that this discussion and all the work that you guys have done is not trusted. I take that information from the gentleman, Mr. Taylor, who stood up and said something about an AC pipeline debacle. I don't remember a debacle. I remember that people brought forward articles that were from 2019 that said the pipes that we got would last 140 years. So what we did was say, okay, we'll back up. That's a good question. We will spend over $3 million to test those pipes to make sure it's time to change them. Is that correct, or did I get that wrong?
1.6 million.
I was gonna say, let me,
It was a lot.
yeah, originally there was a budget that we had to come up with on the fly a bit, you know, to just try to make sure that we had something. Where we landed on it was the 1 to 1.6 million,
Okay, good.
right?
So, since there is a great deal of question, I mean, I'll do it. I'll say, I know you didn't make all this up and you guys aren't all lying, and that's why we have such an upset in this community about how we're spending money. And the AC pipeline debacle, which I don't remember the debacle. I mean, what's it gonna cost us for y'all to go back and start over? Because there is so much question in the majority of this community about how trustworthy you guys are. I mean, you know, we did it for the AC pipeline, so it'll only, take y'all another 5 or 10 years to get you back to where we are now, to look at the numbers different. I mean, I think that's what you're asking, David. I mean, the gentleman that stood up and said, you know, that we're about to rip off the community about this. And I could be way off, but I don't think I am. So, I mean, is there a way to go back and refigure this to make the 25% of the Woodlands happy? Or what? I don't know. Is there an answer to that? Step up here, big time Ed.
Let me know. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mitch Shackelford. I'm Director of Operations for the St. River Authority.
And I'm Connie Curtis, the Director of Technical and Operational Services at the River Authority.
So I'll give you a little bit of an idea. Under operations is the Woodlands Division, ERP Division, Psychometry Division, Flood Management Division, missing one, Highlands Division. All of those are under my purview. To answer your question, we know, just without any hesitation, that we have an education process to go through with the new directors elect. How long that will take, not certain. I've been talking with Eric about trying to find the time, sometime probably in June, to start this process. We did this 2 years ago with all the new directors that came in. There's a lot of information. We can provide you, each of the new directors, with the flash drive that has all the documents on it for the last 3 years. And as Mr. Smith has indicated in the past, that there's a lot of stuff there and it's a lot of reading, and hopefully it's a little better organized when it comes on the flash drive. It is on the Google Drive. But we're happy to sit down, go over the projects, go over the specifics of this particular project that we've been talking about. Happy to go over the AC water line, go over the 10-year project plan, not capital improvement plan, but project plan, which is a planning document for the next 10 years. It is not a budget. It is not etched in stone. It is valued at around 600 million. It's a big number, but it is what we anticipate we will be coming to the MUDs to get authorization. There may be a time when something shifts a little because its time it didn't occur in that time 10-year period. It may shift. Something may take its place, but it's a planning document. So we have a lot of information to go over with everybody, and we're very happy to do that.
So I can't remember the second thing that Mr. Taylor said because I was so hung up on the debacle. But so the concern that the constituents have about us wildly spending millions and millions of dollars just because we have fun doing it. We are in the planning stage and have been for how many years?
Well, no, probably 4 or 5.
Yeah, right. We're not ready to go out there and spend the money. And so the information that's gotten to the public is not accurate as far as I know, because I've been in all those meetings. I just wanted to get that on the record. If you get me recorded, thank you.
Other questions of yes, sure.
I'd like to move on to item 8.
Thank y'all.
Yeah.
That was item 8.
I'm sorry, item 9. Yes, generating budget. Now, this is for information only. The budget will be presented at the individual MUD meetings. So tonight, maybe we just accept it. You get a chance to study it before your MUD meeting next week. If there's any top, if there's any really hot issue questions, you can deal with them tonight. Not.
So Ron, do you want them to go through this presentation or do you want us to just hand this to you?
Do the budget group? Yes.
I'd like to suggest that we have an executive summary presentation.
Get direction for next month.
With some conclusions, and then details can be presented.
Okay, we'll take the executive summary.
Here, real quick, level. You want to take it? What?
Gonna do the executive summary? All right, so you have this packet in front of you. This is our presentation. We're gonna pass it out next week. We're also gonna put in the budget. Sorry, and we're also gonna put the budget that you have as well. On 2 slides, I want you to look at. Everything else we can get into. The first one is going to be the second slide that looks like this. What you're gonna see on the left-hand side is that the wholesale water rate from the Woodlands division to y'all is going to decrease by 2%, which is 5 cents. Okay? That is a decrease of the water rate from our Woodlands division to y'all. Other side of it, you'll see that the wastewater rate is not going to increase. It is going to stay stable at $5.65, hence the equal sign. Recap, executive summary, water rate going down 2%, 5 cents. Sewer rate staying the same. Okay, if you have questions, can answer from an executive session. So, next item, okay? Next page. This is another item. So the GRP rate, which is also on your water bill as a surface water conversion fee, okay? A lot of information on here, but what you're gonna see is the GRP is reducing their 2 rates. This reduction from the GRP fee is what's causing and helping the reduction on the wholesale rate. A lot of detail, we can get into it at any point. What GRP is doing is the current groundwater rate is $2.99. Okay, that is the amount that we charge the GRP if you pump groundwater. That's going from $2.99 down to $2.67. Okay, that is up here toward the top.
And why did that happen?
Why is that happening? Demand is increasing is the big thing. Demand went up about 1.4 billion gallons per year.
Is that because of the increase in the percentage we're taking?
No, that's due to the growth in the county.
Yeah.
So that accounts roughly about $4, maybe $5 million worth of additional revenue. The GRP division has also cut about 1.5, maybe closer to $2 million worth of expenses by finding efficiencies. One being we're doing more stuff in-house. The last thing is staffing has reduced the GRP by, I would say 2.25 FTEs, just over 2 FTEs we have cut for the GRP. So we do look for reductions as much as we can. So groundwater rate is dropping 11%. Surface water rate, which is just underneath that, it is currently 341, it's going to 326, which is a 4% reduction. What that means is the GRP division charges the Woodlands division less, okay? In turn, we sell a blended rate to y'all. That rate is going to go down from, it's on the left-hand side, $3.20 to $2.97, 7-cent reduction, okay? 7% reduction. Sometimes I can. One thing to note about this page here in the GRP, you are literally the second people to see it. Okay, first public entity. GRP review committee, with the exception of one person, has not seen this. This is subject to change. I show this to them Monday. Okay, I say that because this goes through the same process. GRP rate goes through the same process that your rates go through. Yours, we bring it to you now. No vote today. Final vote by the trustees is in August. Okay, little different GRP. I presented to them this month, and then in June is when they vote on the rate. After they vote, our board votes, and then it's fine at that point. So,
It's not set.
It's not set at this point. Executive summary, everything else behind this is everything great that Hazen's going to say. Did you said executive session?
Did, the growth in the county,
Yes.
that include any, those two additional customers who are asking for that.
Not yet. What, two additional customers, 88, 89. So 88 and 89 are already a part of the GRP. They just want to add surface water. They already do pay ground.
I know, but
They're not new customers.
I know what I'm saying is about the end, like, you would got to hand in for to the exit, you know, people. Correct.
In those rates is the 3 cent reduction both on the surface water and the groundwater fee, or the debt defeasance, debt reduction that we spent the 14 million on out of the excess funding with the GRP. So that is built into those numbers that Chris mentioned.
Chris, I guess next week you'll be going to each of the separate levels.
Yeah. Next
Did a
week,
good job, so maybe.
we'll put it in your packet if you have any questions. Just let us know.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 10, attorney's report.
Yes, sir. Not much to touch on. Next month, or next week, we have 19 new directors to see. So that will be, a lot of our effort next week is to get everyone, start that onboarding process. And then, as Ed mentioned, I'm going to be visiting with Eric to try to find some time for us to do a new director orientation, similar to what we did in 2022. We had a number of directors in 22. I can't remember exactly how many, but it wasn't 19. So a lot of new folks. So we'll try to get people seated and start getting them oriented as soon as we can. Happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Item 11. Operating reserve, R&R fund, emergency reserve policy.
Yeah, at the last meeting, there was discussion about this, and the directive to the trustees was to direct any questions or specific recommended changes to consider. To me, I've not received any specific changes, so we kept it on the agenda now.
There's an issue we got. Item 12, we see the general manager.
All right, well, the further we've come along, several of my items have gone away, so we've talked about them. That's good. I did want to, we already talked about chlorine situation earlier this week. I did want to talk about the storm event as it relates to flooding or the drainage in and around the Woodlands. I can report that overall the Woodlands did an amazing job handling it. Now, it's as simple as some of those bands that were, on Tuesday or Wednesday flying north of the lake to then south of the lake. All those were running across the Woodlands. Things might have been different, but we held up pretty well. We always have a few little hot spots here and there that we look at during rain events. We drove around to all those during the event to look at them, and everything looked to be handling it pretty well. So it was a significant event, and as was mentioned somewhere earlier tonight, certainly folks, I think you did, Diane, certainly folks north of here got hit a lot harder than we did, and are suffering a lot more, but happy to report we did pretty well. There is an article in in the back of your packet on PFAS. As we see more and more of that, we'll be sharing that with you. And then just to kind of touch on what Brian just mentioned, we will be putting together a director orientation. We have a steep learning curve in some cases to just get folks up to speed on what's been going on, not just with the treatment plant, but all mud related things. So we'll be looking to put that together as soon as we can, likely in June, maybe July, but we'll try to get on, put schedule together and get everybody included in that. So with that, those are the items that I had.
Is Woodlands Water going to put out any information on the elections, who the elections were, up to vote count, your percentage of the eligible voters voted?
We haven't yet. Throughout the election, we direct everybody to the county election source. I don't know if we've done that in the past, any stats or statistics. We hadn't planned to. We can. We have to dig that up.
I'd like to get an update on the software conversion schedule. And I realize that that's a hot topic, but if we could have that information prepared for the Monday meeting next week. I'd like to know, I know you said we needed an additional contract to do some additional work, outside contractor.
That's underway.
Okay.
That data conversion
Okay.
into the new system. Yep, we're currently.
I'd like to get a schedule and an update on it.
Sure.
And with respect to the chlorine issue, I was at a meeting this morning and received two comments. They were both auditory for the communications that went on regarding this chlorine issue. One of them happened to be another doctor. And he said, I was glad to have that information. He lives in the north of the Woodlands. So that was well done. Thank you.
Thank you. We felt it was important to communicate with the public. I do want to say too, we have some stats on the, so we sent it out through those that are in our water smart system. So granted, not everybody in the Woodlands is on that. Almost 50% or so are in that. However, 79% of the folks that got it opened it, which is off the charts, unheard of. That you get that much response. So as we continue last year and continue to encourage the public, get signed up for Water Smart, use it. It's a great tool, not only for water conservation, identifying leaks, but we're using it as a great tool to communicate. And in that case, when we have an emergency or an item of communication that we need to get out quickly, that's been a great tool for us. And it looks like people are opening, is the point. So I want to continue to encourage it.
26,000 emails it went to.
Yeah, 26,000 emails. So anyway.
Item 13 is ad hoc committee reports. Personnel committee, I don't think that. The last committee call.
The full audit committee met with the Sandy Central Road Authority to do a preliminary review of the budget presentation that we had on packages. Today, we reviewed again the budget meeting session.
Thank you. Public education today. Today.
Yes, the Public Education Committee, excuse me, met today, 2 items to report, following up on the Water Smart. We will be looking at prioritizing education materials for customers so that they can learn to fully utilize all the functionality that's available through the Water Smart interface, and you're hearing some elements that how it's going to be used more and more in the future. The second thing to report out is the communications consultant, Holloway, provided an update on infrastructure, communications, and schedule. There was a lot of discussion about this. And an action item arising was related to forming a resident business representative advisory group. An invitee list and group charter is to be developed. And further, in relation to that and other matters, Holloway will be developing a survey for Woodlands water customers with some input from the Education Committee, ideas from the Public Education Committee. And that's my report.
Is any need to have an executive session? Not the same. And we don't need to reconvene. Last item 16, discuss items for the future agenda.
Okay, so we have 17 new directors that have a mandate, what we've been told. And I just point out that there's at least 120,000 people that live in the Woodlands. And Mr. Maggart got 133 votes. So we need to understand what their mandate is, Ken.
Let me say something.
Now I'm gonna speak, yeah. Since he spoke to me, I want, number one, number one, I didn't say, it's not your turn. Okay.
Ron?
No, I want to understand the man. Yeah, I don't think this is on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an item to put on the agenda.
We should put the item and not the discussion.
Okay, I don't, I would like to put on the agenda is to talk about the mandate. Talk about, so, yeah, to get the counts, see how, I guess you want to see how big the mandate was.
Question
I would like to-
in relation to that.
That's
Ryan?
the detail.
Sorry.
It's called
I thought that,
politics.
The canvassing of the results, that's the month's function.
Correct.
And when is that happening?
We don't have official results. from the county.
Okay.
We have unofficial results, and so we need to get the official, and we should get those in time to canvass next week.
Okay.
We will get those.
So it can be on the agenda for next month.
Correct.
Yes.
I would like to have an analysis also of when the WWA ran the elections, in which we had 2 MUDs compete, 1 MUD compete, right? And everybody got their terms renewed. Then we should have a summary of how many people got their terms renewed with no vote. Last 2 years, we've had every MUD competitive, every MUD, not by accident. And there's probably
Except Metro-
27,
except Metro.
but 27 new directors in the last 2 years. That says something about the way the process was run before.
If doesn't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring data.
Well, let's do it once. because-
It's called politics. And
That's
we've
right.
we all have been through it before.
Yeah.
And some people win and some people lose. And congratulate the winners,
Yeah.
okay? They got to deal with all these problems coming up. And I don't have to.
I just want to thank Harmony for all his years of service. And welcome the new guys on board, and we'll see what happens next election.
Is it adjourned?
Adjourned.